It all started on the last day of school, when we said each other goodbyes and started walking back to our houses. It was a cold winter afternoon, and the roads were packed with fresh snow, and through the streams of students walking by, you can hear a thud of someone falling at regular intervals. Our black leather shoes were just not made for the snow. The regular thuds and the giggles as everyone would take a fall, and I was giggling when my friend fell. I was the next one, and as I fell, I took my other friend with me, and down we did go. We got up, dusted the pants, and me and my friend who fell took the normal route, while another friend of ours took the different routes, but we exchanged the backpacks, as ours was heavier and they were going to take a shortcut. They took our bags and we took theirs, just to even things out, and we started walking. We were at the famous square point when a car took a one-way turn and approached us from behind. We had no idea of this happening, and we were busy talking and making our way back to our dorms. Suddenly, I felt a hand grabbing me from behind. For split seconds, I thought it was someone I knew. I looked back. They were strangers. And there, in split seconds, I made the decision and let my friend's bag go and started running, and so did my friend. The passerby tried to intervene, but they fired shots in the air, and as they did, everyone made their way and dispersed, and we stopped right where we were. And I could see it was my friend. He was down. The bullet that they allegedly shot in fire must have ricocheted and hit him slightly and is cutting it. He was screaming in pain, and I was hiding behind the square bunch when they approached my friend. And as they did, I thought they might hurt him, so I got out. They slapped my friend and picked me up and dropped me in the car and headed to a secluded location. After a while, they decided to ask me to write a letter to my parents, telling them how I've been kidnapped, and they said they would deliver it to my house. They asked me to add their number to have a chat, so I wrote the letter, and then, without asking me the address, went on to deliver it. And then they waited. They never showed me their face. I told them I was angry, and they did arrange some pizza and Coca-Cola for me. They waited for 2 days, and there was no response. They thought the address they used was wrong, and they decided to cross-check it with me. And when I gave them the address, they realized that they had it wrong in the first place. They sent the letter via their secret accomplice. They told me why they kidnapped me. They said that my father was responsible for making the life of the people of the neighborhood hell. He told me that my father approved an industry that poisoned their water supply and killed most of their people. They even had the evidence to prove. All they needed was media to go on and disclose it. But it failed when media decided not to expose the tycoon. So instead, they decided to kidnap me and do it via live television. As they told me this, I realized that they have got the wrong person. And as I told them, they decided to have a decent conversations. They were ready to let me go since they weren't really criminal. All they wanted to do was a right thing. They just didn't know the way to do so. So they decided to come up with a plan where they would push me in front of a media office with all the evidence and record it all live on their media phones and upload it. They also uploaded all the evidence firsthand into the drive that they gave me access and asked me to give it to someone who I can trust. They apologized as they said they will push me when they let me out. And so they did. They pushed me out from the car. It was the same media house that covered my story of kidnapping, and with all the evidence, as I was lying on the floor as they pushed me, people picked me up. And I was comforted in the waiting room. But I got up and straight away gave the copy of evidence to the editor and passed out. Turns out, I was in shock even if I didn't look scared. I woke up in my home, and the first thing I did was turn up the television. And I was glad to see that they decided to run the news, and the tycoon was arrested, and he was none other than the father of my friend who went with me. We never realized he was that rich. Turns out, I was credited for bringing in the evidence, and police did ask and hassle me with questions for the next few days. But I kept the secret with me. They never caught those who kidnapped me, and I never snitched. My friend stopped talking to me as he blamed me for his father's arrest. He eventually left the place and moved away. A month later, I was at the local cake shop where I ordered a pastry to go. The man did not charge me and told me that I can come to the place for a treat anytime. I recognized his voice and nodded as I smiled. And to this day, I am still friends with the baker. The very baker that kidnapped me along with his friends. Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so. I go to uni here in Lancaster in the UK, and like most students, I'm out clubbing every weekend that I can afford it. I've had some of the best nights of my life with the girls at Lancaster City Center. But I'm not gonna lie, I've seen some really horrid things too, from girls weeing themselves where they were too drunk, to stand to bar fights where rabid lads were whipping bottles at each other. I think alcohol has the ability to bring out the absolute worst in people. And it was on a night out in Lancaster that one of the scariest things had ever been part of for witness to happen right in front of me. So we're leaving the club on Saturday night, planning on stumbling over the road, the kebab house, to get ourselves some cheesy chips, when we see this girl sitting outside the club, looking absolutely rotten drunk. The poor thing can barely keep her eyes open, and it doesn't look like anyone there is looking after her, which was honestly a little bit concerning. But the kebab place, we ended up sitting down and had these big glass windows that looked out into the street. So from my window seat, I could still keep my eyes on her. Like I might choose the chips and I'm sitting there eating them when I see this lad walk up to her who takes her by the hand and then starts trying to get her to stand up. I was really relieved at first because I thought her boyfriend had showed up to take her home. But the longer I looked, the more I just got this bad feeling in the pit of my stomach. Not only was this girl just refusing to go with this guy when she had every reason to want to get home and out of the cold, but this guy was like looking over her shoulder and looking around like he didn't want people to see what he was doing. You know, making sure the coast was clear or something. It was such an obvious sign of guilt, and I could just tell that something wasn't quite right. Eventually, the guy just pulls the girl up to her feet while she weakly struggles and fails to shake them off. And then, he starts dragging her away from the club and into the middle of the streets. I started alerting my mates to this, and immediately we all get up from the table we're at, grabbing our boxes of chips and heading out into the street to confront the guy. We rush over, intended to give it our best British passive-aggressive "excuse me, do you know her?" when out like nowhere this car rushes up and brakes violently next to the pair of them. But in doing so, one of the front wheels like runs over the girl's foot, and she lets out this kind of dwell in pain. Then as the guy drags her around the side of the car that we're approaching, we see her foot like flopping around in this really unnatural way where her ankle is really obviously broken. The guy then starts to basically bundle the girl into the back of the seat that had at least 3 other guys in it. We only just catch them in time to try to stop it, or asking if he knows her, and asking if the girl if she's alright, insisting he needs to call an ambulance for her right that instant. He starts trying to tell us that everything's okay, and then he knows her and is going to take her to an accident emergency to have her foot looked at. One of my mates asked him what her name is, and he sort of freezes, hesitates, and pulls some random name out of his butt in a way that made it painfully obvious that he didn't know her, before he walked up to her just a few minutes before we started going mad, like telling him we're going to call the police if he doesn't let her go. And this gets the other lads in the car really agitated, who start barking at him to get the girl in the car, which he does almost violently before the car starts to drive away. I'm trying to get the car number plates, while one of my mates is on the phone to the police, but I can't make it out properly. So for one horrible moment, I thought that was it, that something terrible was going to happen to that girl, and we totally just failed to stop it. But I turned around, and my other two friends are piling into the Hackney cab screaming, "Get in, Chloe!" Then what followed was legit like a movie made his own, like follow the car, and then we're off was in around Leicester City Centre, following this black Volvo with the lads and the injured girl inside. As we're following it, it's just chaos in the back of the cab. One of my mates is still on the phone to the police telling them what's going on. Another one of my mates is giving the cab driver the lockdown on the situation. All the while, I'm noting the fact that the lads don't seem to be driving anywhere near the local A&E. They're actually headed out to the city center towards the suburbs, which to me was a pretty good indicator that we're trying to take her somewhere dark and secluded to do God knows what to her. My mate got off the phone with the police and told us that they told her that they had a unit in the area and they weren't messing about either. It was like a minute or two before we saw blue flashing lights and the cab driver pulled his cab back away from the Volvo to let police slip into pulling them over. When they finally do pull over, we all pile out of the cab while the driver waits for us, watching what was going on and shouting over and over, "Liar, liar," when the guy starts telling the policeman that the girl is their friend and that they're taking her home. The other policeman who was there then comes over to us and starts getting our side of the story, which basically involves me telling him everything I had seen. And now I said it was something suspicious. What happened next all unfolded over the course of like an hour, with more police cars turning up to keep an eye on the lads, while one set of policemen got the girl out of the car and drove her to the hospital. I'm not sure if the lads got arrested or not, but I know they got their details taken down, and no matter what happened after that, I know the girl ended up being taken away from the obvious danger and getting her foot seen too. My only real concern then was that the cab driver was going to charge us like an arm and a leg for keeping him occupied for so long. They actually refused to take any money off of us in the end, saying it was just nice to see some people doing some good in the world. And then, when his daughter's our age and gets into any trouble, that he'd hoped there'd be some good Samaritans like us to help her out. For the longest time, me and my friend lived next door to these absolutely insane people that made our lives a complete living hell for like an entire year. They were pretty well behaved for the first few months after they moved in, but after a while, they started absolutely blasting music in the middle of the night. I'm not just talking about the gentle kind of bass thump that passively is annoying. I'm talking the kind of loud where you couldn't get a wink of sleep. The police had to be called out a few times to get them to turn it down, and even then, they confessed that they couldn't really do anything other than issue fines. And they got progressively worse though. And it turned out half the reason the music was so loud was to match the sound of the mom and dad having these legit fist fights in the middle of the night. It wasn't even a case of it being a one-sided domestic abuse either. The dad sometimes had worse black eyes than the mom, and scratches all down his face where she'd probably close them to death. They used to knock the 7 shades out of each other, but we didn't think they were too dangerous to anyone outside their own family. Once or twice my dad have gotten into confrontations with them about smell coming from their backyard, or the fact that they used to blast music. The dad of this insane family had threatened to kill my dad once or twice, but none of us actually thought he would go through with it, and thank God they didn't. Then for some reason, it went really quiet over there for a few weeks, and it got to the point we thought that it actually moved. Only they hadn't moved at all. They were just keeping their heads down because they straight up killed their own daughter. Apparently, she tried to run away from home and ended up in a shelter somewhere. They tracked her down, dragged her into the car one night, taking her somewhere secluded, and then beat her to death. I'm not sure they even meant to kill her. They just beat her up so bad that she ended up dying not long after that. That's why they had been so quiet. They didn't want to bring down any attention on themselves when they were dealing with disposing of her body. We had police basically camped out on our street for like weeks after they'd been arrested. All kinds of forensic vans with people in those full-bodied white fabric suits going in and out all hours of the day. They were obviously looking for traces of the girl, but whether or not they found anything, I'm not really sure. I do know it was in the paper though, and like I said, I thank God the guy never did anything to my dad, because he did actually go on to murder somebody, his own daughter at that.